Hello everybody, I'm back with another video for you today, and I'm going to do a pretty brutally honest review, if you like, of all of the Gwent expansions. There have been 5 of them in total so far. We've got one coming next month, and we'll see how all of these stack up compared to each other in a little tier list that I've got here. I saw that quite a few of you enjoyed this format of video, and I think it allows me to talk about some of the more interesting topics and just things in Gwent, surrounding Gwent and everything in between. So let's jump into it. Disclaimer, these are my opinions. Probably I might, I'm going to piss off some people here with these opinions. And this is going to be I'm going to be pretty critical here. And I'm also going to kind of judge each of these expansions on when they first released and sort of the initial period after they released. I'll also take into account what they've done for the game, the impact that they've had in the long term. I'll take that into account a little bit, but also don't read into this too much. It's not like super serious. It's not, this is objectively how good each of these expansions were. It's just my opinion and thoughts on it. So feel free to let me know if you disagree and where you would place them personally, but it's it's nothing to get too crazy about. So let's start, shall we? I guess we can start from the very beginning, from Crimson Curse. Now, I know a lot of people really, I think, like this expansion. It was a good expansion. It kind of fleshed out the base game with a lot of new mechanics, bleeding, vitality, shield, and all sorts of, pretty nice card design and interesting mechanics. And, of course, Homecoming was pretty bog standard, pretty bare bones, and having Crimson Curse come in there to pick up the slack definitely felt nice at the time, and it was very hyped up. Probably the most hyped up expansion in terms of the people being ready for it and excited for it before it actually dropped. I'm here to say this expansion wasn't quite as good as everyone says, and that's for a few reasons. Firstly, balance when this came out was really bad. I mean, you had Detlef, who was crazily overpowered. He was the best leader in the game by far, dealing 12 points of damage effectively. I mean, it was 6 points of damage, 12-point leader, which even now would be pretty broken with the amount of power creep there is in the game. But back then, nothing could compete with that in any way. It was ridiculous. It had to get kind of hotfixed. There were also some cards that were just really imbalanced, particularly Detlef, Higher Vampire, which somehow, I don't know how they greenlit that card, which was 20 for 10, for example, before getting nerfed. So there was some pretty poor balance, honestly, and that kind of took away, especially after the first day or two of the expansion, everyone just ended up playing Detlef and winning with that, and it was kind of a bit rubbish. So balance wasn't great, and also there were some bugs. It was pretty buggy. I mean, a lot of the Gwent expansions are, have been very buggy, as I'm sure you guys are aware. Particularly with Crimson Curse, though, there was a very bad one, which was Traveling Merchant. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but the card gave card advantage. So everyone, who was abusing this card had 2 5-provision cards, which just gained them card advantage in their deck. So that was pretty broken. And yeah, that had to get fixed, but a lot of people playing with that on pro rank and abusing the hell out of that. So for those reasons, I think this expansion kind of sucked in the sort of quality and how should we put it? Polished department, I guess, is the best word for it. So yeah, Crimson Curse, while it did a lot of nice things for the game and, was pretty hyped up and stuff, I think it's not actually as hot as people say. So I'm actually going to put this one in C tier. I think this is kind of average-ish when you take into account what it did do for the game, but also the huge problems that it had coming in. And I think we were a little bit rose-tinted with our glasses when we were looking at the expansion. Since it was the first one, we were all very excited for something new to come out and change up the Homecoming meta and all that stuff. So not actually sure that expansion was too polished or great at the end of the day, but it did do some good things for the game, so it's by no means the worst on the list here. So next up we have Novograd. This was the expansion which added a whole faction to the game. Didn't do too much else, just added Syndicate and some dual faction cards. I'm a little bit disappointed that dual faction cards haven't really been explored aside from in this expansion. For that reason, it felt like a bit of a shoehorned in thing in order to just make it so other people had stuff to play with for this expansion. Yeah, as an expansion, it was a bit weird because it felt like there wasn't too much change for the other factions, only for this new one, which didn't appeal to a huge amount of people. And I definitely remember feeling a little bit lowered hype for this one than I was feeling for Crimson Curse. It didn't feel as great. Novograd at the time wasn't a super exciting, direction I feel for the game to go in, and the execution of it wasn't super great at the start in terms of balancing and all the rest of it. There were some pretty broken things in the faction, very last minute changes with the faction, and poorly thought out decisions there. But all in all, it actually ended up pretty okay, despite the concerns I had and the some of the problems it had on release. The main downside, I think, for this expansion was it didn't add too much in the moment for everyone playing the game. It was only for people who were interested in a new faction, who had the resources to craft it. But I think all in all, this expansion was pretty decent, especially for the long-term health of the game. And for that reason, I think I'll put this one in A tier, honestly. It was a pretty good expansion, all things considered. Added a lot to the game in the long run. But, not quite perfect. The dual faction cards helped a little bit with the other factions getting something new, but that was the main drawback to that one, I think. Alright, next up, Iron Judgement, right? That's the next one, I think. I don't know the exact order here, but I think it's Iron Judgement and then Merchants of Fear, right? So, how was Iron Judgement? Well, honestly, I didn't really play Iron Judgement when it came out, guys. This is probably one of my least favourite expansions, just in terms of how much I actually played the game at the time of it releasing. That was for a few reasons. Number one, I think that it was really buggy, if I remember correctly. There were all sorts of audio issues where, you couldn't really even have the sound on in Gwent, otherwise it would, blast your ears with fucking leader taunts and stuff. I don't know. It was weird. That definitely put me off, and also, I don't know, there's something about this expansion that I wasn't a huge fan of, just in terms of card design, I guess. I didn't really want to do defenders. That wasn't something I was particularly vibing with at the time, and I think Squirtel was pretty broken and didn't really get nerfed and stuff, which took away a little bit from that. So a little bit of lack of balance, I guess, and some pretty bad bugs. And for me, just not an expansion I was very hyped for or excited by the cards. Probably that's due to my own situation at the time and what I was feeling about Gwent, so can't deduct too much from that. All in all, it did add some pretty important things, I think, to the game. But personally, I'm going to have to put this actually lower than Crimson Curse. I'm going to put this one in E tier. I did not like Iron Judgement. That actually, I think Iron Judgement actively pushed me away from Gwent rather than making me want to play it, which is not really what you want for a Gwent expansion, I feel. Okay, next up, Merchants of Ophir. This is an interesting one because it didn't add very many cards, only sort of stratagems, scenarios, and then a few others, but I think this had a huge effect on the game, and it did spice things up a lot when it came out. The one downside I have for this expansion is the scenarios not being super well thought out, and of course there not being that many cards involved in it, so it seemed like kind of a half an expansion almost. It didn't get announced or revealed in the same way the others did. So for that reason, I don't know, it's a bit of a hard one to judge. I would say this one was pretty good in terms of what it did for the game, and for drawing players back in, but yeah, scenarios became a bit of an issue for the game, I think, and definitely took away in terms of my fun factor for a while, and probably a lot of people, just the bomb heaver meta that ensued, and really the poor lack of thinking about, how will scenarios actually work in this game that we've got with artifact removal and whatnot. So for that reason, I think this is going to have to go in B. It's not a bad expansion. It's probably better than most, and it did impact the game quite a lot, with even some of the gold cards that were introduced, like the Beast, for example. That was a Merchants of Ophir card, and everyone's been playing that, right? That's had a huge impact on the game. Soul for Syndicate. These cards are quite important and impactful, and quite well designed as well. So there's definitely some highlights to Merchants of Ophir. I think it was just a bit small, and yeah, could have been a little bit better thought out with scenarios. Maybe could have had those be done in a slightly different way, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, not a bad expansion. And finally, we've got Master Mirror, the most recent expansion. Oh, I've got mixed feelings on this one. I don't really know where to place it. You know, on the one hand, it added some pretty cool mechanics. I remember being very excited about Northern Realms frigates. Kerak frigates were very cool design, I thought, for a card. And likewise on some of the evolving mechanics, devotion, interesting stuff, you know, getting some new things into the game. But I've got to say, I mean, again, guys, the balance was horrible on this one, similar to Crimson Curse. I mean, you guys were here for it, right? A lot of people didn't even want to play with Skellige being a thing. Took them ages to fix, to tone that down. Just not super great balance on that one. And personally, I wasn't a huge fan of a lot of the copy-paste design and homogeneous sort of design of the cards. You know, a lot of things like all the 7 provision engine-ish cards that just were effectively the same as each other, but slightly different depending on what faction, and evolving cards, of course, all starting at the same strength and provision amounts, and just doing slightly different things for each faction. That felt very lazy to me. Not sure what the reasoning behind it was. It probably isn't laziness, you know, at the end of the day. Possibly it's some mandate to, you know, try to make things as balanced as possible, but I don't know. Felt very, very odd, and took away a lot of the hype for this one for me, seeing all of those cards being pretty much the same and not much design space being used with each of them. So, with all that being said, I don't know if I can place this very highly at all. I mean, at the end of the day, we got some pretty cool mechanics, but I think this is going to fit nicely in D. I think it was better than Iron Judgement, for me personally. You might disagree with that, but honestly, I didn't really like this expansion too much. It was a bit... could have been a lot better, I think. Wasted potential, really. So yeah, that's going to be my tier list. Maybe very controversial. Let me know what you think. I'm interested to hear some other thoughts and you know, thinkings on how these went down. And where do you think the next expansion is gonna turn up? I hope we get an S tier expansion. Incredible card design, no bugs, polished, just, you know, balanced, all of this great stuff. We can hope, right? My expectations are not super high, they often aren't, but we'll see how it goes. With that being said, hopefully you enjoyed the video, guys. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.